Welcome back to Fruitful Minutes. We're continuing our discussion on myths around health and wellness. And today we're going to tackle a big one again, related to gluten.
Gluten.
Right.
Oh, the gluten. Yeah. So there's this myth that going gluten-free is the healthier choice. Just across the board.
Right.
I got to have my gluten-free everything because it's better for me.
Right.
So why is that kind of wrong?
Wow. Yeah. No, so many things wrong with that. Cutting gluten out of your diet and just replacing it with other processed foods that are gluten-free is not actually healthy. And a lot of people are doing it because they think it is, right? And so I did want to break this one down a little bit.
All right.
So a lot of people don't understand what gluten even is.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Do you know what it is, like what it is in general?
Its function? Yeah. Okay. So this is how it was explained to me. When you're making dough and you're kind of kneading the dough and adding the water, when it starts to get that gummy texture, when it starts to actually get stretchy, that's gluten working. So it's essentially that like binding stretchiness in flour.
So gluten is a protein that we find in grains. And yes, it is. It provides that sticky, stretchy, anything that makes dough ooey and gooey and
delicious.
Right? Like,
yes,
that is gluten doing its job.
Right.
Gluten is also what they put in wallpaper paste.
Oh?
Yeah, to make it so sticky, right? So
wow.
In theory, gluten is not great for us.
Okay.
And we've crossbred our wheat to have all this gluten that it didn't naturally contain anyway. So
Another
we've kind
problem
of
with sourcing.
The way we've grown things.
Mm-hmm.
The other problem is the way we harvest our grains in this country. I know wheat that is not organic, right, is sprayed with pesticide for 3 days. And think about the glue-containing components in that wheat, and then we sprayed it with pesticide for 3 days straight. That absorbs pesticide and it's kind of stuck in there, right? So a lot of people, it's not just gluten that people are having a problem with. It's all this pesticide that we're having a problem with. But swapping out a gluten-full treat for a gluten-free treat, a lot of times when they take the gluten out and they put other things in, there's sometimes more sugar in gluten-free foods.
More of a refined flour they're using.
Or they're using rice, which is more carb heavy, which is going to turn into more sugar, right? So the sourcing of what they're using in terms of replacing the wheat or the gluten-containing grains becomes problematic. But a lot of people are just dropping one form of bread for the gluten-free bread, and it doesn't mean it's better for us.
Right. And so a disclaimer too. This, of course, applies to assuming you don't have a gluten allergy or, of course, that your doctor or physician hasn't said you should cut out gluten. This is more of the general, I didn't know gluten was bad. I guess I'll just replace everything in my pantry with a gluten-free version. That's where issues come into play, because if you don't really have a health goal associated with that change.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people are cutting it out for a lot of health reasons, and they're working with a practitioner. And like you said, that's not what we're talking about. But a lot of people are just assuming, or they don't know what gluten-free is or what things contain gluten naturally. So there are still products in stores, like rice is labeled gluten-free. Rice
or popcorn.
Right. Those were naturally gluten-free to begin with.
Yes.
Right. So it's showing up on a lot of labels now. And again, I think there's a lot of people, nuts are gluten-free labeled, right? Like nuts didn't have gluten to begin with, which is great.
Right.
But because it's become this big thing and everybody's getting rid of it, it's being slapped on all these packages where, there wasn't gluten in there to begin with.
And it's misleading for the consumer, of course, which is why we always advocate for being your own health advocate and reading labels and knowing why you're buying something. Because unfortunately, there can be marketing tactics with marshmallows being a fat-free food. Okay, cool. That's not the problem with marshmallows. Or like popcorn, or like what you were saying, where it's like there's naturally nothing glutinous in here, but it's there so that the consumer says, I think I'm doing a healthier job.
Right. And a lot of times these specialty foods, which is what we'll call them at this point, they're a little bit pricier sometimes, right? And I've seen people get a little upset. They're like, I don't care if my nuts have gluten or not. I'm like, oh man, right? Like that's not... They didn't have gluten to begin with. Now it's being labeled, so it's being labeled everywhere. Yeah. And people they're assuming that they're paying more because of the gluten-free labels on there. And for things that didn't naturally contain gluten, it's not changing anything.
So read your labels, basically, Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for breaking that down. Hope that was helpful for you guys. If you kind of were wondering what the heck is up with this gluten thing anyways, I feel like it's definitely a trend that has been consistent. So we just encourage you to keep your personal health goals in mind and know why you're making certain decisions and not just get led astray by a label. So this actually concludes our series about myths surrounding health and wellness. If you guys have any other myths that you can think of or want us to talk about, leave it in the comments below. We look forward to seeing you on the next Fruitful Minutes.